Hello, everyone. Welcome to Selling Without Fear, Salesmanship for Business Owners. It's very good to see you today. I'd love to know where you're at, what line of work that you're in, what business ideas that you have. Please let me know why you're here. Are you looking to sell better? Are you looking to get selling without all that icky feeling when you get to that ask? You're like, oh, here it comes. Ugh, I feel like I gotta ask him for money. I get it. I get it. I used to struggle with that too, and I'm going to show you a really easy way to close without closing and not getting people feeling all that icky. Why is my, hope that's not going to flick on and off the entire time because that's going to drive me crazy. Here we go. Let's see if I can adjust my screen. Anyway, it's really good to see you. So if you are joining me today, please let me know where you're from, what business you're in. Go ahead and type that in the comments section. We're just getting some people joining me. We are broadcasting live on Facebook, a couple of different places on Facebook, in fact, and on LinkedIn and on YouTube. For those of you who have signed up through Eventbrite, you will be getting a replay sent to you automatically. So for those of you I know may not be able to stick around, didn't hear from anybody in advance, but sometimes people say, hey, I want this session, but I really can't stay for too long. Totally get it. I know this is in the middle of some of your work days. That's totally fine. And sometimes we get a fair amount of people from overseas as well. I'm based out of the United States here in the Midwest. But for those of you who are in different parts of the world, we get a lot of people from the UK. I was number two. The number two country in my broadcast was Ireland, of all places. I thought that was really interesting. So if you are representing that, any additional countries, please let me know. All right, so we're going to get into this right now. Quiet bunch today. Please put in the comment section where you're from if you feel so inclined. Otherwise, I would love to hear from you. But all right, we're going to get right to it. So we are here to learn to sell without fear, and do that without that icky, gross feeling at the end of the day where you're like, oh my gosh, is this ever going to wash off? I don't want to be that guy. I don't like buying that way. I don't like being sold to. But yeah, I don't want to sell that way either. I don't want to feel gross at the end of the day or like I'm trying to punch people in the mouth with birthday cake. That's just terrible, right? Let them eat their own cake. So let's get to this right now. Selling without fear. We're going to get straight into the agenda. And we're going to get into the systems part of the business. We're going to talk a little bit about the Viper methodology in terms of looking at this from a top-down perspective so that you can put salesmanship into the right spot in your business. I'm bringing this up now because a lot of times people will talk about salesmanship and they're thinking, yeah, I really need help with my sales. When in fact, they really don't need help with their sales. They actually need help with their lead generation. They think that sales is getting the people in. That is not that. That is lead generation. Sales is once they're in, it's closing the loop. So you might be a person who also does sales in addition to lead generation. That's fine. There are plenty of salespeople who do their own lead generation. That is not this course. So if that's what you signed up for, that is not this. That would be marketing magic. That's actually a completely different course. We're really not going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about as if the person is already in front of you or already on the phone, and you are having that conversation with you're having that conversation with them right up front. So we got Michael King. Hello, I'm Mike from Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm in the business of program and system creations. I'm a first-time seller. Fantastic, man. And you're going to learn a lot today, Mike, especially about how to sell, but not selling. This is more of a consultative type selling. It does not mean it's passive. Not at all. We're not just going to wait and, oh, well, if you feel like, no, we're not. This isn't going to be all touchy-feely. This is just going to be asking them lots of questions and then bringing solutions to them that actually matter to them. Most of the time when I see people are really high pressure sales, they've not taken any time at all to understand the buyer and the buyer's needs. That is a massive waste of everyone's time. It's a massive waste of their time, and it's a massive waste of your time. That's one problem I see with high pressure sales, is that they're not taking the time to see if the solution is even what the person needs. And that's a problem. So we're going to get into that today. Michael Heck. Michelle. Sorry, Michelle Heck. Thank you, Michelle. My name is Michelle Heck, and I'm from St. Louis area, and I work for Globe Life Liberty National. Oh, okay. I'm actually familiar with you guys. You guys had done. We did at one time. We don't anymore, but we had some people who had that through my company that I I let my people, I was paying it through my company that I was employing people. So I know exactly what you guys do. Like supplemental insurance and different stuff. So really good. And I actually lived in Kirkwood for a while, so love me some St. Louis. All right, so let's get to it today. Thanks guys for sharing that. So I just want you to understand that we're going to take a systems approach. We're going to take a top-down approach. So it's going to start out a little slow, but it is going to we are going to pick up pace here. Probably be done right about an hour from now. So if you do have to hop off at the top of the hour, I totally understand. Really quick too, I am going to make a quick offer at the end for those of you who want to go and take this much deeper. I have a 12-week salesmanship essentials challenge coming up, and it's starting this Saturday. So I'll be talking more about that. And if it is something that you wanted, like you're just like, yep, I really like what this is about, and if you think it's great, fine. We can talk about it at the end. If you don't, you can hop off, and it's I promise you're not going to hurt my feelings. So love me some St. Louis. Yep, I do. Love me some fried ravioli. I was there when so KMOX is the radio station that's there, and I was not much of a baseball fan when I went there, but I'll tell you what, if you live in St. Louis for any period of time at all, you just become a Cardinals fan just by virtue of living there. It just gets infected into your blood. So it's good stuff. But I remember it was Joe Buck. He was that famous line where he was talking about Edgar Renteria, like, I cannot believe what I just saw. Really good fun. All right, let's get to it. So the rest of the agenda is the 4 core functions of business: the lead generation, the sales, the operations, and accounting. They have to they have to exist in all functions of business, and we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about where sales fits in with that, by the way, salesmanship specifically. We'll talk about the discovery call, which is the first contact you're having with that individual. And if you don't sell that way, like let's say that you sell, people just come in and they buy from you straight away, especially if you have a lower priced item, you may not have a discovery call, but it still is going to necessitate, there's certain questions in that initial contact that you're going to need to ask them. So even if it's not necessarily a discovery call and then a follow-up sequence after that, it is going to be important for you to have those questions lined out. And then we're going to get into the actual sales conversation, where you're picking up the conversation where the lead generation leaves off. And then, of course, we'll talk about different success strategies at the end. So when it talks about selling, when we're talking about selling specifically, we're talking about either selling one-to-one or selling one-to-many. Selling one-to-one and selling one-to-many, there are a lot of similarities, but there are also significant differences. And I want to make sure that you understand the difference between selling one-to-one and selling one-to-many is in the number of buying units that are in the room. Now, what do I mean by buying units? I know that sounds like really terrible, but there's no other way to kind of to address this. But it's like the number of buying decisions. So in other words, if I'm speaking, let's say I'm speaking to 5 people, that doesn't mean that there's 5 individual decisions in the room. It could be I'm selling to that entire group. Hey, do all of you want this one thing? Right? And all of you may want this one thing. So in other words, if I'm selling group insurance, it may not necessarily be the group that decides. It might be the boss that decides. Make sense? So like if you've got, whereas if I'm selling to 5 people in the room and I'm selling supplemental insurance, right? This person wants dental, this person wants vision, this person wants dental and vision, this person wants when they're out of work, right? And they need supplemental care, right? So these are the sorts of things, I can't think of what that's called. but that's the thing that where you might, so if there's, in that particular case, there's 5 different decisions going on. That's selling one-to-many. Versus selling one-to-one is where there's one decision that needs to be made. So you may be having that conversation with one individual, or a married couple, with their adult children that all need to make one decision. Does that make sense? So selling one-to-one doesn't necessarily mean selling one person to one person. It means one person selling one buying decision. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And the reason why I bring that up now is because there are going to be people that may be involved in the buying decision that all need to be in the room at the same time. And if they're not all in the room at the same time, hold on one second, guys. If they're not all in the room at the same time, they could be wasting your time, and they're wasting their time too, because they're just going to be saying, well, let me get all the information and then I'll pass it along to everybody else, which is something I never want to agree to, like ever. I never want to agree to that. I want everybody to make the buying decision when I'm there all at one time. So I'm not always trying to revisit the conversation over and over again. All right. So let's talk about the one thing that I want to talk about specifically, and we're going to get to the systems component here in just a second, is when you're selling. I hear this all the time where people are like, oh, I just want, I'm just really looking for that satisfied customer. Okay. Listen, we just really want we want happy customers. The whole thing about between satisfied and happy, look, I want you to put aside satisfied customers and all that stuff. I want you to set that aside right now, because satisfied customers are not what you're looking for. I would even say you're not even want happy customers. Because here's the thing. Let me give you this analogy. Let's pretend that Michelle, let's say that you were going out to have lunch with a friend of yours, okay? And you go to a place in St. Louis and you sit down, you're seated reasonably fast, and the waiter brings over your drinks, and you look at the menu and you order it, and it comes reasonably fast, right? And the food is good, and you get the bill and you pay it and it's reasonable, and you leave and you are satisfied. Who are you going to tell because of your satisfactory experience and your satisfactory meal? You're likely to tell not one person. You might, someone's gonna say, oh, where'd you go to eat? Oh, I went to such and such. Okay. Oh, okay. How was it? It was good. You're not nothing. You might even be happy about the experience. But what you're looking for is a raving fanatic. I want you to be a raving fanatic about your experience. Like, oh my gosh, this waiter was like perfect. Like, he was like great. He was like, showed up on, he gave me some really good, he gave us like a taste test for this thing. And then when the bill came, they made like a big production out of it. It was really cool. Like, like whatever it is, whatever the thing is, whatever the shtick is, they've made you a raving fanatic. So now you're going to talk about it to everybody. And that is what you're looking for, is a raving fanatic out of your people. And that starts with the lead generation function, and it continues on all the way through to the end, even long after they have paid the bill, long after they have left. And that is all about salesmanship. Okay? So your job is to create trust with the prospect. That's your whole entire job, okay? And that's what you're trying to do. It's interesting that, whenever I start talking about salesmanship specifically, and people are talking about salesmanship, sorry, I've got something that keeps popping up on my, there we go. There we go. We're good. So this is interesting thing. This quote comes from, or this idea, this concept comes from Vince Lombardi. If you know anything about American football, Vince Lombardi is an absolute legend in the coaching space in NFL football. And the interesting thing about him is that he oversaw the Green Bay Packers during a time where, in the course of 7 years, they won the championship game. They didn't always call it the Super Bowl over this period of time, but basically they won the Super Bowl 5 out of 7 years. That is an insane amount of wins in a very short period of time. And Vince Lombardi was the head coach. In fact, he was walking in to the training camp in 1961, where he sat and he walked into this locker room. They're getting ready to start training camp. Now, you got to keep in mind, he's standing in front of men who have played football for most of their lives. I'm not even talking like most of their professional careers. I'm talking about most of their lives. These are men that have played football from sandlot football all the way up through Pop Warner and high school and college. And here they are. Some of them were even Pro Bowlers. And he stood out there, had a football in his hand, extended it, and said, "Gentlemen, this is a football." And he went on, he put the football down, and he went and started reviewing all of the basics of the game. Everything from blocking to tackling to all the things that these guys would have learned, some of them 10 and 20 years ago. But he reviewed the basics, and he did that. And it was even reported that one of the one of the Pro Bowlers says, hey, coach, can you slow down a little bit? And he smirked and he went right on going about reviewing the basics. And here's the thing about this is that they never had a losing season after that. And they won the championship game in 61, 62, 65, 66, and 67. That's right. They had a three-peat. And that was the amazing thing. And he did that, and he owed all of that success to the business, or to the basics. And here's the thing is it boring? Absolutely. It is boring, and boredom comes from repetition. But I don't know how in the world you achieve mastery without repetition. So this is one of the things I know some of you are going to hear some of these things already, but I'm telling you, salesmanship is one of those things that every time I go through this class on my own, I remember something a little bit better. So this is one of the reasons why people often hate selling, is that it feels like you, especially, tell me if this is true for you. You feel like you have to convince someone to do something that they don't want to do, or you just hate asking people for money. Anybody feel like that? Or you feel like you're bothering people when you have to actually say, hey, I'm following back up with you. Anybody say that? Hey, I'm just following back up with you. Eliminate that word just. Eliminate that word just in that scenario, because when you do that, it's like, oh, I'm just following up for you, right? It sounds like you're begging. That's not that. That's not what you are. You're the salesman bringing them something that they probably need and need desperately. But it is your job to bring it to them. And if they don't want to make the choice, that's okay. Next. There's other fish in the sea. And some people will and some people won't. But your job is to create trust with them. Okay? For some, let's say, Michelle saying it's the thrill of the chase. Give more context to that, Michelle. I think I know what you mean by that, but let me know what specifically you mean, because I think I don't want to say that wrong. But yeah, let me get a little bit more specific on that. And by the way, Michelle, you brought up a good point, or maybe think of a quick point. If you guys have questions along the way, please type them in, but be really specific in the question. Don't say like, oh, what does that mean? Because I'm gonna be like 3 minutes later, and then I'm like, look at your thing and like, oh, I have no idea what that you're talking about. So I just want to make sure that if you guys do have questions, I can answer them appropriately. All right, so let's get back to it. So this is all about a strategic approach to managing your life and your business. And everything I'm going to be talking about in the systems function is related to this book here, The Time Wealthy Advantage. If you're in the United States and you'd like to get a copy of it, you can go to my website. It's, oh, I didn't put the banner up on the bottom. That is strategicboardroom.com. Or if you're outside the US and you'd like to order a copy, your best bet would be to go through Amazon. Let's see. Michelle saying chasing our DMs, they are always a challenge to get to. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. And that's the thing. Like for me, it's not necessarily the chase. Most sales people, they are horrible at following up. And that's the thing where, especially like you, Michelle, you're in the insurance space. The thing is following up with them to make sure that you're following up to deliver value to them. And that's the one thing that I'm going to talk about here. I'm going to be talking about that a lot, is delivering and bringing value to them. And what are some ways that we can actually deliver value? I'll bring this back up here in just a little bit. But the Viper framework starts from a top-down perspective, which includes vision, infrastructure, process, execution, and reporting. It's an acronym: vision, infrastructure, process, execution, reporting. I'm not going to get into the weeds on all of these right now. That's for a separate session. But I am going to be talking about vision. Vision specifically has two components. It's got personal vision and it's got business vision. The personal vision is basically, where is it that you want to go? Where do you want to go? Michelle, where do you want to go? Michael, where do you want to go? Right? Joe, where do you want to go? So these are the sorts of things when you start, like, what do you mean, where do I want to go? Like, where do I want to go in life? That's really important. And it's really important from a sales perspective that you understand what these people are looking, what they're trying to accomplish. If you can bring solutions to them that align with their aspirations and goals, that's going to help you sell better. Even if necessarily you don't have a product or service that directly helps them, wouldn't you rather have someone that is a satisfied customer, or I'm sorry, a raving fan? Wouldn't you be happy with someone that loves your product or service, right? Versus just someone that's like, yeah, it kind of fits. No, I would rather they be a happy customer or a raving fan of someone else's stuff rather than an unhappy customer of mine. That is exactly what I want. But if I know exactly what their personal vision is, and if my product or service directly aligns with that product or service, I have a moral obligation to get that in front of them, don't I? Yeah, absolutely. So this is why I'm saying, where do you want to go? Understanding your personal vision, but specifically understanding their personal vision as best you possibly can. So let's keep this about you though, for just for now, because this is your personal vision. This is your Viper framework. This is your business. Because once you understand where you want to go, then you can reverse engineer a business vision that delivers that delivers that to you. So you could say, cool, personal vision is where you want to go. Business vision is how we're going to get there. And the thing is, it's interesting because I've sat in many masterminds and training sessions and seminars and so forth with people who were legitimately crushing it financially, like making 6 and 7 figures a month net. And meanwhile, their home life is a complete train wreck. And you know what the thing that they were worried about the most? They were worried about making an extra comma in their bank account. That's the thing they were shooting for. And I get it, man. I'm not here to preach. When I was in my 20s, you weren't going to tell me that this was any different. I'm like, yeah. Let me make that 100 grand a month, and then I'll worry about that better life later on. But I'm telling you, I chased that for almost 2 decades until I finally got my priorities right and really started focusing on my personal vision and then building businesses that delivered that personal vision for me. There's no way in the world I would be able to do these sessions for 90 minutes in the middle of my workday. 15 years ago, there was no way I would have been able to do that, because I was so operationally buried with all the day-to-day minutia. There was no way I could do it. My phone would never let it happen. So the danger in creating a business vision without ever giving any consideration to a personal vision is that you end up creating a life that exists to serve the business. And I'm just telling you, that sucks. And it's an empty well that just never gets filled in. So what I want you to do, and I want you to think about this. So again, think about that personal vision. Think about what that would look like for you. We're going to leave that there for right now. Now let's get on to personal vision, let's get on to business vision. When you're looking at business vision, I want you to think about this, and it's really important. I'm going to put one word on the screen that you have to just own when it comes to selling, and that is research. You have got to know your product, your service, and your customer and your industry backwards, forwards, and upside down. Why is that? Because it's going to help you be much more creative when people come to you and they go, oh yeah, well, I've already got insurance. It does this. Okay, cool. Could you tell me a little bit about your insurance? I just want to if you're interested, the main thing that I'm asking right now is because you had mentioned that you've got some family, right? And you said that it was really important that you felt protected. Okay. And I'm glad that you feel protected and that you have insurance already. Would you mind going through I can do a quick insurance audit with you and then maybe show you if there's some areas where you're weak. We can look at that, and you might say, well, I feel okay about my level of risk, or we can look at other solutions. And I may not have those solutions. You may have to go somewhere else for those solutions. Wouldn't that make sense? Now, what did I do? I brought them value. I'm not like, well, why don't you try and maybe look at my stuff, and then buy my thing. That is not salesmanship. That's being a bully. That's being a pain in the neck. No, bring them value. Would you be interested in a totally free insurance audit, where we'll look at all your insurance products? And then you can figure out, oh, you know what? It seems like you've got life insurance handled, and it seems like you got your business insurance handled, but there is some gaps over here that maybe you haven't considered in terms of maybe income insurance. Have you ever thought of that, right? Or maybe where you've got short-term disability, you could have that, or long-term disability needs, right? Or long-term care, something along those lines. There's always, you can't be solid everywhere, but again, this is where you could provide value to them in terms of something along those lines. Does that make sense? Okay. So if you're, and Michael, I'm not 100% sure what you're doing with business of program and system creations. I'm not sure if that's AI or if that's in the IT world, but whatever that is, again, you could provide a free audit and say, look, I'm not here to sell you anything. If we've got a product or service that can help you out, great. And if I don't have that product or service, but we see a gap, I can still help you find what it is that you're looking for. Wouldn't that make sense? That's more of the approach where you're bringing value, but you can't do that unless you know what you're talking about. And again, we'll mention this later, but the fastest way to build trust with your avatar, with the person sitting across from you, is to demonstrate that you know what you're talking about. Demonstrate competence. Okay? So Michael's saying, yes, that's AI, particularly in the agent creation domain. That's still pretty broad. So, and again, you don't have to get super, I know this is like a public thing, so you don't have to put it out there. But I just want to make sure, like, there's a lot of agentic AI going on right now, and in so many different fields. So if you've got that dialed in, that's great. I'm not trying to beat you up. I just want to make sure that you're dialed in, because this is going to make a lot more sense here when we go through the 3 C's of business vision. So Michael, thanks for responding back. I just want to make sure that this is absolutely relevant to you, and I do believe that this is. So anytime I get hired as a strategist and people bring me in as a fractional CSO, which is a chief strategic officer, fractional basically means I work on it as a contractual basis. Then I'm working, basically as a consultant, and I get that quite a bit. So for those of you who are, or when I'm working as a strategist, anytime that I have been brought into an organization where there are gaps somewhere, maybe they've got massive amounts of turnover with their staff, maybe they've got a bad company culture, maybe they've got lots of turnover with their customers, maybe they're just not profitable. Any of those, and plenty other business dysfunctions that happen, they're all related to one of these 3 C's. I just see it all the time. And these 3 C's are core purpose, core values, and client avatar. Now you might be thinking, what does this have to do with selling? It has everything to do with selling, and you'll understand why here in a second. So let's get to core purpose. Core purpose is specifically about what business that you're in and what problems do you solve specifically. And you have to be highly specific in your answers. And I'm just going to pick on you for just a second, Michael, and I'm not suggesting that this is the case for you, but I see this a lot, especially right now. I see it in real estate, I see it in the contracting world, and I see it in AI. I do see it in IT quite a bit as well. But what I'm seeing here is, I do an AI solution. Okay, there are so many facets of AI right now, and they're expanding every day. That does not tell me much. If someone tells me that they're in real estate, that does not tell me much. I'll stick on the real estate bandwagon for just a hot second. In the real estate world, I have people who come to me. I make most of my income through real estate. I have people who come to me and say, "Oh yeah, I have I'm in the real estate business." I'm like, "Cool. What is it you do?" "Well, I am a wholesaler." I'm like, "Great. Where are you a wholesaler at?" And a wholesaler means that they buy properties direct from people who are trying to sell them generally, and they will find another buyer and they make money on the spread. Okay, fine. Where do you do that? Might do it in New York. I'm like, okay, you're in New York. I'm thinking Manhattan. There's 5 boroughs in Manhattan, and those are all pretty different markets. I'm like, that's a pretty big market. I'm like, so have you narrowed that down? They're like, oh no, I do it in New York and New Jersey and North Carolina and Texas and Colorado. I'm like, oh, you mean New York State? Wow. And you just defined, I don't know, how many is that? 5 different states? And that's probably 10,000 different markets? Okay. How in the world do you think you're going to make that work? By the way, the mass majority don't make that work. And the problem is because, and I see this all the time with entrepreneurs specifically, is that because every time they get out of the shower, they have a new business idea, they don't stay aligned with any one core purpose long enough. So it's really important that you get very dialed in to that core purpose. The analogy that I like to use is one of a mechanic. So think about your mechanic. You have a local guy who's a mechanic, and he works on passenger-rated vehicles. Can he install a headlight for you? Most certainly. Could he do a brake job for you? Sure. Could he do wiper blades? Absolutely. Could he replace your brake lines? Sure. Could he repair your transmission? I don't know. Transmissions are usually pretty specific. They usually takes a high level of skill set that's usually beyond your normal everyday mechanic. So he may say, nope, I don't do transmission work, but I will do this. Okay, will you sell tires? Nah, I don't really want to keep an inventory of tires here, so I don't do those either, right? So he's kind of obnoxious about what he doesn't do, but he's very specific about what he does do. Does he do just one thing? Does he only work on left wiper blades? No, that'd be ludicrous, right? I mean, he may work on all makes and models, but he won't work on dump trucks. He won't work on lawnmowers. So you see what I'm saying? So he's got multiple things that he can do for that avatar, for those passenger rated vehicles. But he doesn't do all things. And he's a little obnoxious about what he does do and a little obnoxious about what he doesn't. And that's when you can start to be polarizing. So when it comes to that core purpose, I want you to think of that in terms of your local mechanic. That is what I want you to be like, because you can now start occupying the mental real estate of that person there. But does your local mechanic also like sell essential oils while you're in the lobby? Probably not. He might have a vending machine, but is he known for his vending machine? Probably not. He's known for his car repair. That's why I'm saying you've got to stay really true to your core purpose, get that thing up and running, and then you can look at something different. So that's core purpose. Next is your core values. The core values are what matters to you about this business, and how would the world be worse off if you went out of business? Okay, now before some of you just kind of roll your eyes, and I can hear some of those eyes rolling already, like, oh geez, here we are talking about core values. Look, I get it. I know there are these soft skill things, and they're kind of squishy, and I'm just telling you, if you don't take the time to define your core values, you're going to attract all sorts of people that are in alignment with your core values, and some people who are not in alignment with your core values. Have you ever worked with a boss who didn't align with your core values? You probably know that. You probably have. I don't need to know any names, right? But when you are working at a place that doesn't align with your core values, you're like, my gosh, all we do is lie to our customers, or all we do is rip people off, or whatever it is, and it doesn't align with your core values, it kind of starts hurting your soul. When you define your core values, then this is really important, because when you have your core values defined well, you start bringing the people to you that you want, and you start rejecting the people that you don't. And this is where you can be magnetic in your marketing. The magnets have two poles, right? Magnets attract, but magnets also repel. And that is what I want you to be like in your marketing. I want you to think about it. From a magnetic perspective, you attract and you repel. So the core values are what's going to attract people who most want to work with you. There's people who were on this call earlier that are no longer on this call. You know why? Because I hate this guy's face. I can't stand his voice, and I hate him. Okay, whatever, right? Am I going to lose sleep over it? Not one wink. You know why? Because that's okay. They're probably a better fit for someone else. But for those of you who are remaining, there's probably more alignment with core values than disalignment. Make sense? Or misalignment. Is disalignment already also a word? We'll say that they're both words, okay? Misalignment in terms of core values. So let's just say that is why it's so important. So when you're looking at your core values, you're defining your core values, you might be thinking, well, how do we define these? How do we make this tangible? Okay, listen, Michelle or Michael or Joe or Sam, if you have let's say for argument's sake, let's say that we all walk around with a set of values. I value peanut M&Ms. But I'm not going to go to war over peanut M&Ms. Someone breaks into my office here and says, give me your peanut M&Ms. I don't have any at the moment, but if I did, I would give them to him happily and say, go on your way. If someone threatened my family, on the other hand, that would be a violation of a core value, because keeping them safe and keeping them well is part of my core values. So something is if we all walk around with lots of values, but something is a core value when you're willing to get up and take action on something. Okay? Let's see. Hey, Letitia. Hi, Mark. Will this presentation be available, recorded, and sent to us later on? Yes. If you signed up through Eventbrite, it will be sent to you. So if you're coming in a little bit late, the beginning part of this will be sent to you. So yes. Thank you for bringing that up. And by the way, Letitia, if you haven't let us know where you're from, you can type that in, and what line of work that you're in. That way I can kind of make some of this relevant to you as well. So the one other thing, and I'll just make this last point about core values, is when you're defining your core values, again, your core values, when you start defining those from your business and you start thinking about who it is that you really like to work with, and you're defining your core values because those are the things you're going to take action on. We've all worked for those horrible bosses, and you start thinking about your excesses, right? You're excessively bad in life and you're excessively good in life. So think about this. Have you ever had a friend that was wandering off the reservation that you wouldn't follow? Maybe that was a love interest. Maybe that was a family member. But you're like, brother or sister, I cannot follow you down this path. You're heading down a path I can't follow. Likely that was a violation of a core value. So the reason why this is so important is because your core values help determine the DNA of your company. And your core values help determine the company culture. And the company culture and the company brand are inextricably linked. So the company culture is what's experienced by the people inside the organization. The company brand is what's experienced by people from the outside of the organization. That's why this is so important. So take the time to actually define your core values. So we talk core purpose, we talk core values. Now let's talk client avatar. This is what it's all about, man, right? In terms of selling, this is all of these different things. So Letitia is from Ontario, Canada. Very good. Welcome. Glad to have you here. And Clara is joining us from France. I'm a closer. Excellent. What kind of stuff do you close, Clara? Glad you can join us from France. So when you're talking client avatar, I want you to think these are the people who you specifically and ideally want to serve. If you don't take the time to define these people, you will get everybody. And I'm telling you, everybody will not buy your thing. You really want to be specific to a specific person, couple, group, team, whatever, but be really specific in terms of who they are. I like working with married, generally Christians, right? Not necessarily Christian, but people of faith, right? So I like working with married people of faith who are in business for themselves, that have kids at home and are swamped busy. That is who I really like to work with. Now, will I work with someone who's single? Yes, and I have. Will I work with people who aren't necessarily faith driven? Yes, I will, but just understand, like, my faith is kind of a big deal in my life. So I'm not going to like punch you in the mouth with Jesus, but it does come up just with me in terms of who I am. So if that's something that someone's offended by, then generally it's not going to be a good fit, right? So, but I would coach them. I wouldn't have a problem with it. So what if they didn't have kids? So yeah, same. I still have coached people that way too, right? What if they're not in business for themselves? It's tricky, right? Like, are you heading that way, or are you just trying to get better in your current skill set, like, or, you know, in your current job? That's generally not what I do. That's probably a better coach for someone else, right? So I'm really starting to like push people away and kind of pull others towards me who I really like to work with. But I want you to think about this in terms of three components: geographics, demographics, and psychographics. So when you're thinking about their geographics is where they are, right? Where are they at in the world? You know, Clara is from France. Letitia is from Ontario. Michael, did you say Michael? I thought you're in Ann Arbor, Michigan. That's right. And then Michelle is from St. Louis. So we've got people from all over the place. Where are you folks? Where are you living? Now, for me, I tend to work with people in the U.S. Does it mean I won't work with people in Canada? No, not at all. In fact, I've worked with some people in Canada. Not a lot, but a few. I've worked with some people in the UK. I've never worked with anybody in France before, but that'd be cool, right? But I'm just saying, I don't have a specific geography where I won't work, right? But they may have other factors where I don't necessarily know, like if they're doing business within a certain type of country that doesn't really allow for free market capitalism. That might be tough because I don't know the laws. Okay. But geographics is where I would want you to be specific. What about the demographics? The demographics is who they are, right? If geographics is where they are, demographics is who they are. Are they married? Are they single? Are they wealthy? Are they poor? Are they educated? Are they not educated? Etc., etc. And then lastly is psychographics. Psychographics is how they think and how they buy. How they think and how they buy. So in terms of psychographics, I want you to think of the phrase ALIA, A-L-I-A. And that is their attitudes, their lifestyles, their interests, and their aspirations and goals. So when you're thinking of ALIA, you're thinking of all these things. I want you to think of what's their attitude around your product and service. What's their attitude about your industry, right? So, Clara, I'm not sure what you close. Oh, you speak English. Okay, so is that something that they sell? Are they selling like in English? Oh, wait, sorry, here, you got something else here. B2C, make money. I finished my training and looking for collaboration now. Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Perfect. So you're looking to be a closer for someone. That's making a lot of sense. Okay. So in other words, if I understood, someone's attitude towards and in the insurance industry, if I understood someone's attitude towards the AI industry, right now people are like freaked out about AI. And they're thinking like, oh my gosh, it's gonna take over our jobs. No, it's really not, because AI is getting all its information from humans. It's not creating its own information. It's just not. It's not doing its own research. It's all based on research, based on what actual humans are researching. So trust and know. I'm in a PhD program right now for organizational psychology, and so in the next 100 years I might finish my doctorate, whatever. I'm not in a big rush. I just want to. I'm just really enjoying the journey right now. But everyone's freaking out over AI. Like, man, listen. AI is getting its information from us. We're the funnel for AI. It's not coming up with anything new. So trust and know. It's just being able to research and pull from lots of different things. And guess what? AI is not perfect. It comes up with hallucinations. It makes things up. Right? That's not like, that's like asking a crazy person like, "Hey, can you give me directions?" And like, "Yeah, go over there and take a left at the purple bear." And you're like, "That's okay. That's crazy talk," right? And that's kind of the way AI working. Yes, it's getting better. Okay. But that's what I'm saying. Like, you have to think about, there's people who have real negative attitudes around AI. I think AI is a wonderful tool. I don't want to use it as a crutch, but there are some negative attitudes around AI. If you knew that going in, Michael, wouldn't that help you sell better? Yeah, I would help me sell better if I knew what someone's negative attitudes were about AI. Or what about someone's negative attitude towards insurance, or whatever it is? What about someone's lifestyle? Would it be helpful if I knew their lifestyle, if they were young and jet setting, or older and traveling a lot? What are their interests? If they were into American football or European football, or if they were into NASCAR or Formula One? What if they're about their aspirations? Again, their goals in life. What were they aspiring to? Were they looking to go back to school? Were they looking to retire sometime soon? That's really helpful for you to know. So all of these things, again, if you take nothing else away from today, please think about these 4 psychographics and how they're related specifically to your client avatar. So we're going to put the fries in the bag with core purpose, core values, and client avatar. If you are weak in any of these 3 areas, maybe you're weak in all 3 areas, and I would say from 1 to 10 in terms of your core purpose, and 1 to 10 in terms of your core values, and 1 to 10 in terms of your client avatar, if you're less than 7 on any of these, you've got some work to do. And I would say if they're not written down, I'm saying you can't be any greater than a 5. That's just my thoughts. Okay. So let's keep this rolling. So we've got the Viper framework down. Now let's talk about the 4 core functions. We talked just specifically about vision on that one, but let's talk about the 4 core functions for just a minute. The 4 core functions of business are as follows. They are lead generation, sales, operations, and accounting. And your customer's journey happens through your customer's journey happens through your business in that order. And it has to happen that way. It's your lead generation lets them know what it is that you do. Your sales function obviously closes the lead. It closes the sale. The operations and fulfillment function does just that. It's whatever the thing is. If you're building websites, or you're selling insurance, or you're putting on roofs, or whatever it is, that's the fulfillment function. And of course, the accounting function is all about getting paid and paying the bills and all those important things. So that's where that is. So the lead generation function, it lets the world know that you're out there through a variety of marketing approaches. And the effective selling starts in the lead generation function. And it starts by delivering massive amounts of value to your client. And what do I mean? Why is that so important? Because when you're delivering massive amounts of value to your client, and especially when it starts in the lead generation function, they're not going to be so off-putting by when you reach out to them. If I reached out to Michelle knowing that she sold insurance, and I would say, "Hey, did you see this thing coming up around the insurance field?" Right? Did you see this new law coming down? There were plenty of people who were selling so there's something known in the life insurance world, specifically it's specifically in the IUL world, right? So Index Universal Life. And when they were selling Index Universal Life, there was Actuarial Guidance 49B that came up. I know this because I'm a nerd, right? Or geek. I don't know the difference, but one of those two things. I'm a nerd for all this stuff. I geek out on all this little things that matter to me. Well, Actuarial Guidance 49B came up, and I knew all these people who were selling whole life insurance and indexed universal life, and I shared that with them. Mostly for the people who were selling IULs. You know why? Because it mattered directly to those people who were selling IULs. So when I shared that with them, they're like, yeah, we heard this was coming down. I didn't know what the implication of that was. Yeah, well, it's live now. And this is what it looks like. So did I ask them to buy anything from me? No, I just shared something of value to them. That is what I'm talking about when you're bringing value to your customer and you're not always asking them to buy things. This is where you're looking like the ratio should be about 4-to-1. Bring them value, 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 ask. That's what I'm talking about. Send them 4 things of value. Then when you have an ask, it's not like, oh, geez, here he is again with his damn hat in his hand, asking us to buy some crap. You see, does that make sense? So bring value to them that matters to them. If they're a single parent and they never get a break, wouldn't it make sense that maybe if your community was hosting like a parents' night out where they like had daycare where they could drop off kids around very licensed and professional people that could handle your kid for an hour or two, where you could just go and sit in your car and cry or whatever you want to do, right? That's the sort of thing that I'm talking about. Like, and you found out about this and you brought it to someone's into their world and let them know and brought it to their awareness. Wouldn't that be valuable for them? Of course it would. So again, this is how you create trust with the prospect. And you're creating trust with them by recognizing there are trust triggers. So there's 6 different trust triggers. And the triggers, it's just things that you can do which help go, maybe I can trust this person. And these are just things that will allude to trust. And this is about demonstrating authority. Authority is really where you have credentials or even authorship. I have written 8 books. 5 books I wrote last year. I wrote this book over here that's over my shoulder, which is the one I showed you earlier, which is The Time Wealthy Advantage. The Time Wealthy Advantage gives me authority as an author. So if you are interested in writing a book, if you go to YouTube, I've got several sessions on how to write and publish a business book totally free. If you'd like to come to a live session, I don't have one coming up yet, but I'll put another one out there soon. But again, all of that stuff is about creating and demonstrating authority. And I can't think of a good way to do that by having your own book. What about affinity? Affinity is like a shared interest. So like I mentioned to Michelle earlier that she's in St. Louis and I used to live in Kirkwood, which is just on the southwestern side of St. Louis. And I worked in St. Louis for a while at the Marriott Hotel across from Lambert Field. So I know St. Louis well. I don't know Ann Arbor, Michigan, but I live in Indiana, which is just south of Michigan, and I know that they are having a heck of a winter. Okay, but you see what I'm doing? I'm sharing geography. I'm sharing a heritage. I'm sharing an interest, and that's what affinity marketing does. And that's why, like, when people start talking in terms of salesmanship, like, oh yeah, you always try to find something that you can, like a shared affinity. Yes, don't overdo it. It can be overdone. You can do it by demonstration. We talked about by demonstrating competence. We haven't talked about endorsement, but endorsement is pretty straightforward. It's about having like a famous person endorse your product or service, or even someone that they just know, which is why a referral is so important, because a referral means that it is referred of someone that they know. That is a really powerful endorsement. We can talk about vulnerability. Vulnerability is like where you're demonstrating, where you have like that damaging admission, like, I messed this up totally, but let me share with you how to do this the right way and not buy the wrong insurance or not buy the wrong AI platform. Okay, makes sense? So this is about demonstrating vulnerability, and of course by association. Association would be like a correlation or a connection to like the same, maybe like a chamber of commerce, membership or BBB membership, something along those lines, right? That's association. So again, the fastest way to create trust is to demonstrate competence. It is, again, to show them you know what you're talking about. And all of that, again, is about the 3 C's of business vision: core purpose, core values, and client avatar. Listen, the market judges you by what you give away for free. It judges you by your samples. So you have to make sure that your samples, the things that you're demonstrating, are of high value. Let me ask you, since the initial people have dropped off, no one else has dropped off on this call. And I know that it's again near the top of the hour, so some of you may have to go. I get that. But I would assume that it's at least been high enough value for you to stick around. Has it been high enough value for you at least to be here? I'm assuming so, because I've done this enough times where people are like, wow, that was really helpful. Okay, great. And we haven't even gotten to the best parts yet. So what I'm saying is make your samples high value. Don't give them crap, because that's what they have to judge you by. I'm like, oh yeah, well, once you spend thousands of dollars, that's when you get the really good stuff. No, give away your good stuff and then just come up with better stuff. And this is about solutions-based selling. It's about coming up to it's that consultative approach and coming alongside them rather than coming at them head to head. So let's talk about this in the next part of the agenda. We're going to talk about the discovery call. And this is where you're aligning your lead generation with your sales. Okay, remember, we talked lead generation, sales, operations, then accounting. That is all 4 of those functions. This is where you're going to align all of these things right out of the gate. So you have to remember this, is that the confused mind will always say no. So if your lead generation function sounds a certain way and the sales function sounds a very different way, the confused mind will reject that. The confused mind will say no. So this gets back down to the core offering. And this is why when you're starting to think, okay, what do I mean by the core offer? The core offer doesn't necessarily mean like the most expensive thing that you do. It's just kind of like the core thing, the core offer that you have. Like what's the most profitable bottom of the funnel thing that you have that you can offer people? So in other words, for me, it's one-to-one coaching. And I've got a very limited amount of people that I do one-to-one coaching with. And the reason for that is because I'm one person and I don't want to be that busy. I get most of my money from real estate. I really like selling books. I really like writing and making programs. And I don't mind doing group calls like this, but I also don't want to be doing so many one-to-one calls where I don't have any bandwidth left for myself or my family. So this is about the core offering that you have for people. And once you understand what that core offer is, then you can start drafting and creating solutions around that core offering and creating marketing content and sales content around that core offer. I'm going to put these 15 reasons why people buy on the screen, and I'm going to take a quick sip of my water. And what I want you to do, take myself down there and take my sip of water. So what you're going to do, I want you to consider the 15 reasons why people buy. Why are they buying from you? They will buy to make money. They will buy to save money, to save time, avoid effort, escape pain. They will buy for more comfort. They will buy for better health. Okay, and keep in mind, let me go back to escaping pain. Escaping pain is just not necessarily physical pain, but could be emotional pain or even spiritual pain. They'll buy for more comfort, better health, which could be in the form of less stress, by the way. They'll buy to gain praise or feel more love or increase their status with their tribe. They will buy for truth, especially if they have felt lied to in the past. That is a big deal. They will buy for growth, which is specifically, they'll buy just because they want growth in their knowledge, they want growth in their faith, growth in their wellness. They will buy because something is new, for novelty. They'll buy to gain more certainty, and they will buy to be in more contribution with others. So what does this have to do with the price of tomatoes? What you're going to do is you're going to take each of these 15 items, and I want you to come up with as many reasons how you directly or indirectly help them in one of these 15 ways. So, Letitia, how do you directly or indirectly help people make money with your product or service? Clara, how do you directly or indirectly help people save money with your product or service? Michelle, how do you directly or indirectly help people save time? Michael, how do you help people avoid effort directly or indirectly with your product or service? And I say directly or indirectly because there may not be a direct correlation, but there may be an indirect one. For example, I don't generally give people better health right? Sometimes I could argue maybe better mental health, I suppose. But do that indirectly? Yeah, indirectly, because of what I do as a strategist. I give them and offer them less stress. So that's why I'm saying, how do you directly or indirectly help them? And what if you come up with 10 reasons under each one of these things? Now you have this whole bucket of requisite knowledge that when someone comes to you and they say, well, I really don't know that your product or service is a good fit because it doesn't do this. I'm like, well, it kind of does. It gets you thinking in a more non-linear way. So let's talk about the discovery call. So we got about another 15 or so minutes. We'll be wrapped up. So the discovery call is what I want you to do is I want you to think of in this context of a discovery call. This is where you're having that initial contact with someone. So someone calls in and they say, hey, I'm interested in your thing, whatever the thing is. I'm interested in your product, your service, your whatever. So you're having this discovery call with them. So these are the questions that I always want to ask. Now, if you're in the type of selling conversation where you're not necessarily going to ask these things like on one call and then schedule a separate one, it's still important that you ask these things up front. So let's look at the discovery call. The discovery call is the first thing I'm going to ask is, okay, cool. Hey, tell me why you're calling today. Great. They start talking about the thing and they're okay. So I'm going to ask these questions, and you don't necessarily have to ask them in this order, but just make sure these questions get asked. So let me ask you, how soon are you looking to address this specific issue? Right? Because a lot of times you think that because they're calling now, it's easy to think that this is a problem that they want solved today. And that's not necessarily true. Just because you're ready to sell to them today doesn't necessarily mean that they're ready to buy today. Okay? The second question is, what kind of budget are you working with, right? Do you have a budget in mind that you're working with to solve this problem? And sometimes they have no clue. Sometimes they're like, yeah, I really want to build a 5-bedroom house with 2 helicopter landing pads and at least 5 separate hot tubs and 12 bathrooms. And I'm like, okay, cool. What kind of budget are you working with? $100,000. You're like, okay, great. That would not work in any country that I know of. Okay. So this is where you have to start thinking, what kind of budget are they working with to solve this problem? And then you can start to educate them a little bit and saying, they're like, well, I don't even know. And that's where you can give them generally a ballpark. And again, I'm just letting you know, whatever they hear is where they're going to be anchored to. Okay. So like, okay, generally what you're talking about is a problem that's somewhere between 30 to 50,000 or 1 to 2,000. Again, you say 1,000, they're going to hear 1,000, right? So I would say probably around the $1,500 range, somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000, but I would say probably around 1,500. Okay. So I'm just telling you, you want to be careful about offering too broad of a range. Sometimes you just can't do that, but you've got to navigate that carefully because again, whatever first numbers they hear, that's what they're going to be anchored to. But you also don't want to be wasting your time with someone that does not have the budget to work. So that's why it's important to ask what kind of budget they're working with to solve this problem. This question often gets missed, and I will tell you, do it at your own peril. Who are all the decision makers? Who are all the decision makers? So when you start asking this question, who are all the decision makers? And you say, well, why do I want to know that? Because a lot of times if you say, well, it's me, it's just me. And then if I show up and there's an additional person there that wants to be involved in the sales conversation, I don't have a problem with that. But if they say, oh, it's me and my bride, and you show up and it's just you and not the bride, I would have a problem with that. I probably would blow up the sales call. I probably would not continue on because like, oh, well, I'll just get the information from you and I'll pass it on to her. I'm like, look, man, if you're going to tell me that she's part of the decision-making process and you're going to pass that on to her, you're going to probably pass it on in a way that's not going to be helpful. I mean, this is going to waste everyone's time. So I'm just saying like, and sometimes I have done that where I've actually rescheduled sales calls because I just knew that it was not going to be the outcome that would have been helpful. So I usually just give a very truncated sales call at that point in time. They've already demonstrated to me some lack of integrity. So I'm like, look, man, I called you like an hour ago and asked you if they were good to go and everyone's going to be there. And you said yes. And then all of a sudden they're not. Like that just to me already starts to demonstrate a potential problem with core values. So again, this is not about being a jerk, but it's about them valuing your time as much as you're valuing theirs. And the last question I like to ask is, Well, it's not the last one. There's one more after this. But one I really do like to ask is, have you ever worked with someone in my industry before? Either way, no matter what the answer, it positions you to start talking a little bit about what you do. Why is that important? So basically I'm saying, hey, have you ever worked with a strategist before? Or you ever worked with someone who's like a coach before? And they say, yeah. I'm like, cool. Was that experience? Oh, it was great. Or, oh, it was horrible. I'm like, cool. Well, let me tell you how I work. Okay. Have you ever worked with someone in my industry before? No, never. Cool. Let me tell you how I work. Make sense? So either way, the transition is cool. Let me tell you how I work. Let me tell you how I do the thing that I do. Okay. So the last question I like to ask is, hey, I know we're in the very early parts of this, but is it okay if I ask you for permission to come up with a referral? Maybe someone that could use my product or service later on. I know right now you don't hardly know me, and I know we're one step into a 10,000-mile journey, but I get a lot of my customers from referrals. And would it be okay if we circle back to that later on down the road? Now, have I asked for the referral? No. Have I asked permission to ask them later? Yes. And what that does is that plants that seed. So when you do ask for that referral later on, it's not a surprise. They've had the opportunity to think about it. So, and it also, again, it puts the onus on you to make sure you deliver. So rightfully so, it does put the pressure back on the sales agent to make sure that they do what they say they're going to do. And this is, again, we talk about why people hate selling is like you feel like you have to convince someone to do something they don't want to do, or you hate asking for money, or they feel like you're bothering people. Great. Now pay attention, because this is where the secret sauce comes in. This is the sales conversation. So this continues the conversation started by the marketing approach, and it picks up where we leave off in the discovery call. So in other words, let's say the discovery call several years ago is, or let's say the discovery call was, oh, you scheduled it for 3 or 4 days down the road. Okay, fine. Now we're at the sales call. Okay. Got a question here from Clara. Clara says, yes, at the end, after 1 hour, they tell you need to talk about it and with my husband. Yes, that's exactly right, Clara. That's exactly right. That's why I want to know the sales. I want to know who the decision makers are in that moment in time before I ever, before I say to them, oh, okay, are you interested in this? How do you want to proceed? Oh, I need to talk it over with my husband. And they're like, wait a minute. I thought they weren't any of the decision makers here, right? This is news to me. So this is why I want to bring this up now. So when you're talking to them during that entire conversation, you know that the decision maker's in front of you and there's no one else that needs to be brought in. And maybe like, well, new information was brought in. Okay, great. When can I meet with them? Let's all three of us sit down and have that conversation. But that drives me bananas. Great point, Clara. Thank you for bringing that up. So we're talking about selling and the selling conversation. This is where we're going to go through these areas here. We're going to go through bonding and rapport. We're going to go through something that's called the UFC, then uncovering their pain, demonstrating competence, and then the post-sell. So let's get into bonding and rapport. Bonding and rapport is, again, it's going to reestablish that emotional connection that you had during the conversation, during the initial conversation. I had a sales conversation with someone earlier, and I wasn't trying to sell them. I don't have to, because I know my stuff is really good. So she had reached back out to me after actually one of these sessions. We had a conversation about something, and I remembered specific things about where she was and what she was trying to accomplish. And I reestablished that emotional connection early on, and not in a manipulative sort of way. I just want to reestablish that emotional connection, because I'm a human being. I want to reestablish emotional connection with that person. And I did, right? I actually enjoy chatting with her. So then I listen for fears and limiting beliefs. So what I'm listening for during that period of time, and again, this is where you're kind of listening for what they're afraid of. Are they afraid of being sold? Are they afraid of making the wrong choice? What are they afraid of? And I'm kind of listening to that during that bonding and rapport session, but I'm also listening for that during the discovery, or during the initial discovery call. I'm listening for their fears. I'm listening for their limiting beliefs. Well, I don't think I can do this, or, oh, I'm not sure that this is right for me, or I'm not sure I'm ready for this. Okay. So that's what I'm listening for. now that I'm in the bonding report, I'm going to wrap up the bonding and rapport section, and that's usually 10 to 15 minutes. If it's going longer than, and I'll be honest with you, if it goes longer than 10 minutes, I'm sorry, you're wasting time. And it's not about being like, punch them in the mouth and like keep things moving. There is a balance to that, but it's your job not to allow them to wander in the conversation. If you start wandering too far off, it is your job as the sales professional to bring them back. If you're having 3-hour sales calls, I'm telling you, they're way too long. Unless you're selling like $300,000 items. And I'm assuming that is not the case on this call or anybody watching this, but regardless, I'm just saying you have to be mindful of not wasting time. Always advancing the sale, either towards advancing them towards qualification or advancing them towards disqualification. One of the two. And once they've indicated disqualification, there's really no need to move on with the sales call. Give them some things. This is why you research. Give them some value, some direction to head in, and then politely excuse yourself. That is your role as the sales agent. So now with the bonding rapport, now you're going to transfer it to what's called the UFC, the upfront contract. So even though we've had conversations up to this point, now pay attention. We've had in conversation, right? We're chatting about swordfish and books and whatever, okay? Now, this is where you transition into the selling mode. Now, keep in mind, the selling has already been started. The salesmanship has already been going. But this is what I say. Well, I should probably earn my paycheck. All right. You invited me here to talk about AI. Or, well, I should probably... I know you had originally reached out to me because you had some questions about your insurance policies. I probably should earn my paycheck. What questions did you have, right? So, that's how I'm transitioning in, right? So generally what I will do is I'm going to say it like this, okay? So I'm using those as loose examples about AI or insurance, but here's what I would generally do, okay? Well, I know you invited me here to talk about working as a strategist, but before we get started, by the way, we've already started, but before we get started, I just want to let you know that you can totally tell me no. If we start getting into this and this is just not a good fit for me, or this is not a good fit for you, you can tell me no, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I had all my feelings removed in the Marine Corps. I promise you're not going to hurt my feelings. But I just want you to feel comfortable enough to tell me no if you don't feel like it's a good fit for you. If, however, I don't feel like what my product or service has, if I don't feel like it's a good fit for you, I may tell you no, because I would rather you be a satisfied customer of someone else's than an unsatisfied customer of mine. Does that make sense? Right? So I'm going to get a little bit of a mess. Okay, great. But if you think this is a great fit and you say yes, and they also think it's a good fit and I say yes, we can figure out what that looks like on the other side. Does that make sense? And this one, I'm waiting for a yes. It's important that they say yes. So if I didn't hear them say yes the first time, I definitely want to get them saying yes the second time. This is called a shy yes. And this is important because it establishes, it's not about, to get them saying yes and they'll say yes to no, it's about establishing that positive framework towards moving forward. It gets them elevated in their state. So let me say that again. Listen, if you don't like this, you can say no. If I don't think it's a good fit, you can tell me no, right? But if I don't think it's a good fit, I can tell you no as well. If, however, does that make sense? Shy yes. On the other hand, if you say yes and I say yes, and we think it's a good fit, we'll figure out where to go from there. We can say yes and we'll figure out what that looks like on the other side. Does that make sense? Get them to say yes, okay? This is known as no, yes, yes, biggest fear. No, yes, yes, biggest fear. I'll do it one more time. So from here, again, probably should earn my paycheck. Before we get started though, I just want to let you know that we're just having a conversation right now. But if you feel that anything that I'm saying is just not a good fit for you, you can totally tell me no. I'm still going to have dinner tonight. My children are still going to love me and my wife's still going to love me. And I just want to let you know, you're not going to hurt my feelings if you tell me no. I just want you to understand, though, that if I feel like what we have to offer is just not the best fit for you, I might tell you no. Does that make sense? right? I would rather you be an unhappy customer of someone. I'd rather you be a happy customer of someone else's than an unhappy customer of mine. Does that make sense? Wait, shy yes. Great. If, on the other hand, you say, yeah, this is kind of works for me, I'd say yes, and I think so too, and I say yes, and you say yes, and I say yes, we figure out what that looks like on the other side. Does that make sense? We can figure out what that looks like? They say yes, okay? So then I would go on to biggest fear. So let me just do that one more time. Look, I might say, because I know I'm going to get this question all the time, and I know this, we learn by repetition. Look, you can tell me no, right? Children's going to love me, blah, blah, blah. I might tell you no, okay? But I would much rather you be a happy customer of someone else's than an unhappy customer of mine. Does that make sense? Great. But you say yes, I say yes, we figure out what that looks like on the other side. Does that make sense? Yes? I wait for the yes. Listen, great. So let me ask, like, my biggest fear is that you're going to get into some sort of situation with someone who ... Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to fill in their biggest fear. Not my biggest fear, even though I said it's my biggest fear. It's like, look, my biggest fear is that you may buy some insurance that's not going to suit your needs. Is that my biggest fear? No, that's not my biggest fear. That's their biggest fear. Where did I learn that? I learned that during the discovery phase. I learned that during the bonding and rapport sessions. That's what I was listening for, is the biggest fear. My biggest fear is that you're going to buy a policy that you're going to find out 5 years from now, that does not serve your family in the right way. And you spent 5 years of premiums that are not going to get you where you want to go. Or, hey, I don't want to sell you an AI product that's not going to solve your problem of trying to get more leads in your business. That's not going to help you at all. Does that make sense? So again, you're going to be talking about their biggest fear, not yours. So you'd say, no, no, yes, yes. Listen, my biggest fear is that you're going to get into some situation that's not going to help you with what you're actually trying to accomplish. Does that make sense? They say yes again. Great. So is there anything in particular that you're trying to accomplish today? I always follow up with that question, is because it's a fantastic, whatever they say, you can transition to the next part. Is there anything specific you would like to accomplish today? And they say, well, I'm trying to get information about this. I'm just learning the pricing, whatever it is they say. Great. Okay. Well, let's get talking about that. So whatever they say, it enables you to transition into the next component to this, right? Advancing the sale. Now we're uncovering their pain. All you're doing is asking questions. Be massively curious and then listen. You should be asking questions, and asking questions, in-depth questions. Don't just ask questions like, well, I'm really afraid of not having the right AI platform for my business. Well, what does it mean to be afraid? Well, I'm scared of, like people do this, and it drives me crazy. I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to get to the emotions of it, but you're being a jerk. Like, don't ask questions that are so clearly pandering to their pain. Just say, so you said you're afraid of buying something that's not going to be a good solution for you. I get that. Do you have any real specific fears, though, that you're looking for? Rather than saying, so what's it like to be afraid? Right? You see what I'm saying? That's a very different thing. And some people, they're taught this really bizarre way of doing this, and I just don't agree with that approach at all. You're being an obnoxious a-hole, and I can't stand it. And when people do that, all that does, it's pushing you further and further away from them. You're not building rapport with them. You're not building trust. And a lot of times I will do where I'll demonstrate my competence by using a story. And I'll create a story using the 3T story format. The 3T story format is title, triggering event, and transformation. So what I'll say is, yeah, I remember when I was a little boy, and that's the title. When I was a little boy, that's the title. And I was going to go fishing with a bunch of friends of mine, and we got down there and we realized we didn't have any bait, right? And that was, by the way, that's the triggering event. We went fishing and we realized we didn't have any bait. That's the triggering event. So then we had to figure out, well, maybe we can catch some grasshoppers and use those as bait, right? When we used some grasshoppers, then we found out that, oh my gosh, grasshoppers work way better than worms in catching certain types of fish. That's a transformation. See, I just made up this story completely on the fly, but you have title, the triggering event, and the transformation. If you can say that story in a couple of breaths, generally a couple of sentences, that's a good story. If it's going to take 10 minutes to tell, probably not the best story. So that's what I'm saying in the sales aspect, when you're telling that story, that allows them to be transported by that story. And this is where you're realizing that when you have problem, agitate, solve, this problem, agitate, solve framework works in any commercial that you're watching. Do you have trouble paying your taxes? Problem, right? Do you hate those calls from the IRS at dinner time? Agitate, rub salt in the wound. Fortunately, there's tax experts which do the blah, 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 blah. Solve, right? Problem, agitate, solution. That's a very normal framework that people do, right? So you could use that in your stories. Again, your whole job is to create trust with the prospect, and those stories will help create trust because those stories help transport them through that whole thing. So much more to unpack in that, but I'm just giving you the basic understanding of this now. So as you're uncovering their pain, this is also how you're an opportunity for you to demonstrate competence. So as you're advancing them continually towards the sale, you're saying, okay, cool. So if I understand your question is, you want to have an AI solution, but you don't want your people getting answered. You don't want to get ridiculous answers, right? So yeah, okay, well, this is how we actually have this solution. So you start demonstrating competence. Is there any other questions? You mentioned something else earlier about X, Y, or Z, right? Did you have any other questions, right? So when you have answered all their questions, here comes the big close. Are you ready for it? It's actually another question. And it goes like this. Okay. So you don't have any other questions? Nope. Okay. Well, how do you want to proceed? And I'm going to do the hardest thing that is so hard for so many people, especially me. And that is to stop talking and to let them think and let them answer. Okay. Well, how do you want to proceed? And then at that point, if they've got any other questions or any other things, and even if at that point they say, well, I really do need to think it over. And I know some people in some frameworks are like, oh no, don't ever let them think it over. Listen, if they say I have to think it over, sometimes depending on them, let's say, okay, listen, to me, that's no, like you're not interested, and that's totally fine. You're not hurting my feelings. But let me ask you, is there anything in particular that you don't feel comfortable with to say yes right now? And I'm not trying to pressure you. I just want to understand if there's something else that you just don't feel pressure, you don't feel good about, okay? That's exactly right, Clara. Blank silence. I love that. I might actually steal that. But is it uncomfortable? Yes. But you're not the one making it uncomfortable. It's just, if there's uncomfortableness, it's because they are feeling uncomfortable. I don't care. You sit quietly and let them make the decision. So, okay, how you want to proceed? If they're ready to move forward, they go, what are the next steps? If they say they need to think it over, cool. Hey, can I just put on my consulting hat for just a second? And I'll gesture. Hey, can I put on my consulting hat? If you're saying you truly do need to think it over, and this is not just because you don't want to hurt my feelings and say no, and I respect that. But if you truly do want to, think it over, how long do you think that you would need to take it over? And I let them answer. I don't say, because if I say 3 days and they go, well, I was thinking like an hour, like, oh, okay. Now I just shot myself in the foot. So what I would say is, how long do you think that you would need to chew on this? And they may say whatever, right? Well, probably would have an answer for you, like by Wednesday. You're like, okay, it's Monday. And sometimes people say, well, I should have an answer for you by January. And you're like, it is February right now. So you're telling me you need to think this over for 11 months, right? In that case, I'm like, okay, to me, that's no. Like, to me, that's just, you're not interested in making the decision, and that's totally fine. So what I'll do is I'll leave it up to you to follow up with me when you're ready. But that's totally fine. Like, I'm not trying to sound like a jerk in that moment, but to me, like, waiting 11 months to make a decision it's just procrastination. They're not in enough pain to make that decision. Okay. So you just want to ask them. And then again, so I'd say, okay, cool. Well, can I follow? How about we set an appointment in our phones? We'll put it in our phone. And I will follow up with you at Wednesday at 4:00. Right? Great. So we move on and we do that. So then So then we've done the bonding rapport, the upfront contract, uncovering pain. Now we do a post sell, right? So this is the thing that most people forget, and I'm telling you, do not forget this. Post sell is basically when they are saying, "Yep, I love this. I'm ready to do this. Here's their credit card number. Ready to pull the trigger." Great. Let me just ask you one quick second. Clara, why are you okay to move forward right now? Why are you okay to move forward right now? I want to know that right then, because that is going to make sure that there's not going to be any buyer's regret later on. Because, hey, tell me why you're okay to move this. Because people buy emotionally and they justify logically. They will rationalize. So what I want them to do is I want them to rationalize it in that moment. Because sure as God made little green apples, you're going to go and they're going to sell this thing, and they're going to get home, and they're going to say, "Yep, I bought this, whatever it was." And the neighbor who knows everything about everything is going to be like, "Oh, dude, you totally got ripped off," right? Or the brother-in-law, or the sister-in-law, or the mother-in-law, or it's always the in-laws, right? But whoever is going to be like, "Oh, dude, you totally got ripped off." No, I feel pretty good about this purchase, actually. Right? You're asking them to justify it now. That way, and you're going to jot those questions down or jot those answers down so that if they do call back and say, "Man, I actually thought this over. I really do. I don't want to move forward." Okay, cool. I'm just confused because you said you want to move forward because of these reasons at a post sale. Did anything change with that? No, just whatever. So sometimes you can still recover it, but usually you just let them move on, right? So that is the fourth item. Let's go and talk about the last part of this around success strategies, and then we'll move on and we'll put the fries in the bag. So the main thing is you got to follow up. You follow up, follow through, follow them. Don't let this grow stale. Always deliver value. And when you're thinking about the peak end rule, people's experiences of something, they either will, they form opinions about the peak of the experience and the end of the experience. That's just the way it is. So can you control the peak? You can't control their peak, but you do control their ending. So you always want to make sure that you're ending on a positive note. So again, when it comes to success strategies, bring massive value to them, and bring massive value to them all the time. Align your lead generation and your sales, and bring solutions, and always have a support system. So think, there's one thing we still need to do. Do you remember? Get your referral. Hey, now that we're at the end, remember in the beginning I asked you about getting a referral? Yeah, can we revisit that now? Is there anybody who could use our product, our product or service to help you out? Get your referral. So by having that support system, this is something I'm just going to get to this real fast. The one thing that I want to bring up with you guys, I do have a 12-week program coming up. And this is actually starting on Saturday, the 21st. So if you are interested, it actually is going to be held through the school community on Strategic Boardroom. So if you are interested, I'll go ahead and put this in here. I know we're getting a little bit lean on time, but I'm going to go ahead and put the, let's see here. Let me find this. There we go. So this is in Strategic Boardroom. It's on school, and there's 3 different things that you can different levels you can sign up for. If you've got any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the session in the section notes. But here is the link there if you are interested. And really what the 12-week session is about, there's the website right there. But if you are interested, it's 12-week salesmanship essentials, and it's going to be 12 Saturdays. For 12 Saturdays, we're going to be talking about sales training for business owners, and everything that I talked about here today, we're going to get much more granular. So if you've got any questions around these specific things, around any of these specific topics, how do I actually have these sorts of individual conversations? There's actually 3 levels that you can purchase. There's one where you're just coming in for the group calls. If you're just kind of getting started out and getting your feet wet, if you actually want some one-to-one sessions with me, there are 2 different levels there. There's kind of a medium level, which gets you a one-to-one session with me, just one-to-one and just once per month. Or if you want unlimited sessions with me, that's a different price. That's the VIP. But if you want to go to the school session, or I'm sorry, the school website, and check that out. You can check that out right there on strategic board at school.com/strategic boardroom. So that is all that I have. I don't see any questions from you guys, so I'll give you another second. All right, I don't have any other questions. All right, well, thank you guys so very much for hanging around today. I do appreciate you you sticking around. And then again, for those of you who did sign up through Eventbrite, you will be getting this via replay. So maybe I will see you on the replay, or maybe I will see you guys in the boardroom. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.